It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. It's Feedback Friday, and I am super tired this Feedback Friday. Interesting feedback this week. I appreciate the people who actually honored my request on Monday and actually just provided their own thoughts instead of criticizing mine. I don't One of the things I know I personally struggle with is I do not have a need to criticize. I prefer when I don't have to do that. One of the things that drove me crazy as an opinion writer with video games is being forced to take a firm stance on something that I just wanted to explore the pros and cons of. That's, I think, something that's led to the bitterness among people who write about video games is forced being forced to conform to a style that is inherently combative and having to get screamed at for an editorial voice that you don't necessarily agree with, but you have to write in. And um, that's part of the reason I stepped away from freelance work for other people, because I don't think that's what is going to be most useful to the community and the industry. And I know I haven't done a lot of game content lately. Partially it's because of health, and I've been struggling with that type of thinking because it's very detail oriented. But partially it's also there's just been no topics that have really inspired me in that regard lately. I don't That's something I care enough about that I don't want to phone it in. And so I'm in understanding mode right now. I'm trying to understand where these various groups that I profoundly disagree with are coming from, because I don't like assuming ill intent. That I don't believe that many people just have nefarious motives, and I'm more interested in the three people that I can have a conversation with as opposed to the 500 people that think I'm evil, because I can't do anything about the 500 people intent on despising me. I can have a conversation with the three people who are interested in having a discussion. Now, that's not a great way to make money. So if you agree with this sentiment and want to support it, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K. This is the point in time where I start looking at subsidized Leanna Care sessions for the next month and going, okay, anybody who wants to chip in something now's the time. I've got a few people on pause right now, just waiting for additional sessions to be paid for. I'd love to give away this stuff for free. I just can't. I need to earn a living. So them's the realities. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this Feedback Friday is I'm going to read one comment from Wellness Wednesday as a level set, because I didn't intend for this to tie in to the greater topic, but I think it does. And then I'm gonna read one from Tuesday that I found interesting, and then we'll get into Mondays because I actively solicited feedback on Monday. So Wellness Wednesday, because I know some of you don't watch it, is on trusting kindness and why some people can't trust kindness. So this is the comment. I feel that I've always had trouble with trusting kindness. Hostility is something I can deal with because I can easily perceive its purpose. But kindness, it's very difficult to understand why someone would be kind, and as a result, I wind up pushing people away. One incident in recent memory saw me correcting someone who calls themselves my friend by pointing out that they are an associate. I mean, I don't know that person well at all. Historically, they'd done some small kind things for me. I can't discern the purpose of them doing those things. I kind of suspect that making that distinction between friend and associate may have hurt them. I don't know. I don't know how to salvage that situation, or even if it can be salvaged, without a severe compromise on the meaning of words that I hold sacred. I should clarify that I have no issues with being kind to others, as I try to do that whenever I am able. For example, if that associate were to ever ask anything of me, I'd likely do it. I just have difficulty figuring out why other people would be kind. Thanks for making this video. It's given me some food for thought. And this comment struck me because I have a higher bar for when I refer to someone as a friend. With me, a friend is somebody I've known for a certain period of time and I've had at least one conflict with. Before I have a fight with somebody or a disagreement with someone, I can't trust that they're a friend, because to me, complementary conflict styles are essential for friendship. Now, I know some people are looser with the term friend, and that's fine. That's just me. And yes, some people do get hurt when people don't see the relationship in the same way. But I think those boundaries in your head, if they work for you, are important and valid. So the only thing I can suggest with that commenter is have a conversation with a person and just tell them why you use the term differently. And that doesn't mean you don't like them. Tell them, if there's anything you can ever do for them, you're there. You just use the word differently. And there's no right or wrong there. It's just your personal comfort. And that doesn't mean, you'll never consider someone a friend. It's just you're slower to adopt the terminology than some others. And I'm the same way. So I completely understand what you're saying in that regard. But that not trusting kindness thing, I think really feeds into interpretations of things. And I'm the opposite. I don't have an inherent understanding of optional hostility. I'm somebody who thinks life is too hard and too short to waste energy being any more aggressive than you have to be. Unfortunately, I'm in a place where I do need to be aggressive at times. And I think this is where some of my instincts come from with the Feedback Friday format, that, as somebody who was a documentarian and a reporter for a really long time, that instinct of asking questions and really listening to the answers to construct some sort of cohesive view of a thing that makes sense. That's essential to that job, right? And, well, it's supposed to be. There's a lot of agenda-driven reporting out there, and I don't think that's actually reporting. I think that's propaganda. But because of that, aggression is exhausting for me. It is a tool, but I don't feel the need to, and I get called fucking hostile all the time by people who don't understand that I'm just joking around. It drives me kind of crazy because holy shit, a lot of the times these are people who are incredibly critical themselves, and maybe that's it. Like, maybe this is a piece that they understand hostility, so they read any friendly challenge as hostile because they understand the purpose of hostility. They don't understand the benefit of a friendly, respectful conversation where two people challenge each other's views and assumptions, right? And this perspective bias is really important in understanding other framings. And that brings me to the next comment. There's a perspective bias comment when we get to the media and depictions of men. Um, but this was an interesting comment on the two women talking one. I didn't pick a lot of comments from this one just because I wanted time for the Monday video, but also there were a lot of people just complaining in the comments. And guys, when people are giving you an olive branch and trying to understand that point of view, it's just tactically expedient to give it a fucking rest. I don't know how else to say that. When someone is actively trying to understand, it is not a trick. It is not some trap. It is a legitimate attempt to understand a point of view that the person doesn't share. And when you engage in unnecessary hostility, all that does is tire the person out and make it harder for them to listen. And the guest on It's Not Therapy this week got into that. So give that a listen if you want to hear more about that. But here's a very interesting comment. One pattern I've seen in the last 20 or so years is what I'd call the giving up on majorities. For example, if you're making a game, you'll ask 100 people what they think. 99 will say it's good, 1% will say it could be changed and they'd like it better. That will count as 99 0-pointers and 1 minus 1 point. And the solution to get a better score is to follow the opinions of the one person who wanted changes. After the change is done, there will be 10 people who don't like the change, 1 who like it, and 89 who think it didn't matter. At this point, the developers will look at how they went from minus 1 point to minus 10 points and throw their hands up in the air and go, "You people are hopeless, we give up. Everyone who disliked the changes can leave and never get back." Now, something all these companies could learn is to actually not run off with the ball and play alone, but actually play together the whole time. Keep the fans informed about the changes that are planned and get those feedback instantly when they say, "We don't want it." And at that point, you know that your option is wasting money on selling less or apologizing to minority people who want a different product since the changes will not be done. Of course, with woke culture, we already know the moment we say, "We want to make Clark Kent gay," and get 5,000 complaints. They'll just yell, "Homophobes will do it regardless if you want it, F off." Because woke people don't care about customers and don't care about money. What they care about is likes, fame, and echo chambers, so they just sit and praise each other for their wokeness. It's funny because my experiences of late, maybe just because I've been canceled by all the wokies, is that it's the other side. It's the anti-SJW faction that I don't want to completely give up on in terms of game development, because I think there are some valid points there. I think that challenging, it's very important to challenge progressivism, just because actual progress has to withstand challenges. And so I don't mind challenges. I actually welcome challenges. But again, if someone's willing to listen to you and you just bite their face off, which is the complaint people have about the wokies, right? That doesn't work. But I do think that the principle the comment made of giving up on majorities is applicable here, because the anti-SJW types thought they saw the wokies getting, and I apologize for the term wokies, I don't like it, but I don't know what else to call it, and I'm tired. But they saw the perception that the wokies were getting their way, and so they started adopting the tactics of the wokies that the truth is nobody in gaming could stand. And I do think that game companies are too quick to bow to criticism. More on that in a bit. But, you know, they saw the perception that the wokies were getting their way, which was actually not true. And no one believes me on this. And it's very frustrating because I know it is true. I've had so many conversations about it that When you're a dev working for a major company, the higher ups tend not to listen to you. The only way to get your way, and this is true in all media, television, even radio, film, they don't listen to people internally. But if enough noise is made externally, you can take it to your boss and go, you see, I'm not the only one who thinks that way. So the changes that were made were the ones that people internally already wanted to make, and the screaming just gave them a permission structure. Now, it wasn't handled well because of what I consider are flaws with PR strategies right now. For people who are wondering what I'm talking about, briefly, right now the game is with media that the higher ups, general editorial, has a story or an arc that they already want to tell. They go out and find a person with a pre-existing fan following that can self-promote and sell that story. So it's a narrative in search of a spokesmodel. I think that's flawed. I think that companies should be doing more to cultivate ideas from people who are smart and wise, not necessarily just charismatic. But nobody listens to me. This is how I know this, right? But I do think that there has been a real misunderstanding of why the changes have been made, and I do think that it's that perception that they will appeal to the one person who didn't like it at the expense of the majority. Now, the counter to that is there is a natural attrition in IPs where people kind of wander away from it. Their lives get busy. People drop off, not necessarily anything wrong with the franchise. It's just you either grow or shrink. It's very rare you're going to just stay level. And so there is constantly this thing of how do we get new people in? And in many ways, that's more art than science. The other problem is that people, and I say this all the time, people who like stuff are much less vocal about it than people who don't like stuff. And so it's very possible that the developers are just not getting the positive feedback, which is why I try to be really positive on the things I like and try to withhold criticism until I'm absolutely certain it needs to be made, or as certain as I can be. Everybody's wrong sometimes, right? All I ask is, as much as the point is absolutely valid, the way to get past that is the like stuff more. Be more vocal about liking stuff. Because I'll tell you, I know with some things I do, it's like, well, people were very happy to tell me everything they hated about it, but the like count, the like dislike ratio is like 95%. So plenty of people liked it. I just don't know why. And that's really frustrating. So let me get into the comments, because I'm running out of time here, about the men in media. And I keep going back to She-Hulk just because people know it. But here we go with the time I have left. From my perspective, the issue is that men are being blamed for failure to protect women from said not great men now. This may not be what She-Hulk is doing, but it's why people have likely started to take issues, because this is a socio-political environment that's developed outside of the show itself as a large cultural thing. The issue can best be exemplified by the Gillette advert about men from a few years ago. The awful guys clearly aren't all guys. However, the guys who aren't awful in the world are being blamed for not acting to stop the awful ones, thus are presented by activists as just as complicit in their actions. I've said about this before, but in the UK, after a woman who's walking home at night alone got attacked and killed, the most high-profile one was the Sarah Everard case. And suddenly, a lot of activists on Twitter were on about how men need to step up to make the knife safe for women to walk home through dark parks without lighting alone. The issue is the idea that we as collective men had failed because we aren't Batman stalking the night to try to take down people with ill intent, watching the whole world from the shadows in case needed. No one can do that crap, not while holding down a regular job. And part of the whole thing with Batman is Bruce can do it because he plays up the Playboy billionaire look so he can sleep during the day. These were people on in the past about how Weinstein could have been stopped because people, including men, knew what he was doing and didn't act to stop it. So to apply this idea of background to She-Hulk, I've not seen the show, so it's entirely theory. It's people interpreting the show as being one of the side of activists and seeing the show as going, look how awful so many men are. Why can't any of the good guys do anything about them? And why is Jen having to suffer such men existing still? There's something to that. Next comment. As you well know, hold people to their own standards is pretty much my mantra, and I don't use death of the author. So while I don't believe in male gaze theory, I know Disney does, or at least they espouse it. It's dubious if a megacorp actually believes in anything. Thank you for that, commenter. Given the way they've killed fan service and rattled their sabers against sexy female characters. So when I look at things they create and try to analyze what they're saying, I think in terms of what it would mean under the social justice worldview. And if people who do believe that every female character has to be ultra sanitized because not doing so would be saying something bad about women generally, write a bunch of evil and pathetic male characters, then I read it as a message that it's something they're saying about men generally. Likewise, after 10 years of feminist critics having carte blanche to smear media all they like and put on pedestals and listen to, I expect the same privileges, and I don't get that. If I, or people like me, criticize, then we're evil incel toxic fans. That's not fair, and I won't give benefit of the doubt to studios who do it. If the same tropes appeared in, say, Japanese media, which generally doesn't conform to woke rules or have that worldview, I wouldn't draw the same conclusions from it. Female characters pull giant mallets out of nowhere to smack dirtbag guys for perving on them all the time, and I've never been offended by it. I know it's just a gag. I know they're not saying it's all guys because they're not woke, and they don't subscribe to the theories that say a woman showing an inch of cleavage means all women are sex objects. If I were allowed to have some mainstream Western media that caters to my demographic foremost, and the studio were willing to say to feminist critics, it's not for you, not everything is going to be for you, like studios say to angry male fans and ignore their criticism, so I could enjoy being catered to in peace without fear it's going to be taken away, I'd be willing to take my lumps when it's media aimed at women and they deserve their enjoyment in peace too. But I don't get that, so I feel it justified in getting angry when I'm told it's not for you and made the butt of the joke. And to a greater or lesser extent, whether they consciously think of it that way, they're just reactive and mirroring what the other side has done to them to hit back. A lot of people on my side seem to internalize the same. I know the people who made this hate me, so that's how I read their work standard. Like one of the most rabidly anti-woke accounts I follow on Twitter, I mean, this guy makes me look tame. I know if a Western work came out and the main character, a mixed-race, danger-haired lesbian, tried to steal a girl away from her abusive boyfriend, he'd lose his damn mind, but it's Gundam Witch from Mercury, so he just goes, why would I care? Sailor Moon had lesbians decades ago. And he completely means it because it's anime, so it's not out-group and it's not assumed to hate white, straight, cisgender males. That's interesting too. Okay, final comment. Summarized, it's perception bias. When some women try to describe their experience to men with something like being hit on, they'll say that from a man's point of view, he only approached one woman and thinks he got unfairly rejected and yelled at. But from the woman's, it's been the 50th time she's been approached for the day, and it gets extremely tiring to center men's feelings and have to use a gentle letdown in order to avoid potential violence. The counter that men sometimes offer is that those 50 men are simply the ones that had the courage to approach her, and it's therefore unfair to generalize all the remaining men that didn't approach her based on that sample, especially if it would be considered toxic for a man to suddenly lash out at a woman doing the same thing, and men and women are supposed to be considered equal. When it comes to the latest She-Hulk episode, when it ended, one of my first thoughts was, and this is last week's, I'm not talking about this week's, the internet is going to have a field day with this. I personally didn't see it as an attack, but what we did get at the end, Jen being targeted and humiliated by an online troll group with the flimsy criticism of not deserving Hulk's power, which some probably translated into the real-world criticism of female counterparts of established heroes. And then going straight to slut-shaming, which, having watched from her perspective, we know isn't true. She held off for multiple dates until initiating, reciprocating, and ultimately thought she was doing so based on a general emotional connection. The fact that she was recorded without her consent, and that said video was then aired to embarrass her, is straight up tackling the phenomenon of revenge porn. So what happens? Jen gets rightly mad. However, being a Hulk, her rage gets the better of her, and now the online trolls think they've won because they've unmasked the monster. Plot-wise, I suspect the group originally wanted to steal the Hulk power for their own use because they thought it was transferable to anyone, but when the Wrecking Crew's attempt failed, they settled on demonizing and isolating Jen to get her out of the way of ultimate plans. Heist breakout. We'll find out the next episode. You're not wrong about Intelligentsia's backstory, commenter. On the one hand, this is exactly the type of thing Bruce was trying to warn her about and ward off by teaching her control, which she thought she didn't need because she's a hot mess. LOL. On the other hand, women probably heavily identified with being justifiably angry about something and then being labeled the villain because their anger, and therefore defiance of social expectation, was seen as a larger violation than the injustice she suffered. What I feel some men fear is if that continues to be the only view of masculinity being presented in media, even in jest, it will quickly become absorbed into the psyche, and then any attempt at genuine criticism or approach will be met with resistance because a negative experience is the only one women have been primed to expect, even if that hasn't been the majority of their real-world experience, rendering the usual tactics for achieving the social markers of masculinity ineffective. And these are all really interesting comments, and where it's left me is with a better understanding of the issue, that's good. Having no idea what to do about it, that's bad. And it just seems like the problem was left to fester so long that the two experiences are so divergent that it's tying into that being unable to trust kindness from anybody thing I talked about in the first comment. And then the, neglecting the majority of the second comment, that people's brains are just wired, and people argue with me about this, but it's science, are just wired to respond more to negative stimulus and positive stimulus because that's what keeps you safe. And okay, I think we've effectively identified the problem. But now I'm going to have to sit and think about what to do about it because the horses already are out of the barn. It's going to take a lot more to solve this than if we effectively handled this circa 2012 to 2015. But play the ball where it lies. So if you want to support these efforts, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks very much for your feedback. It's given me a lot to think about. Have a great weekend.